Hey guys, and welcome to another Q&A Monday video. In this video I'll try to answer as many of your questions as I can in as much detail as possible, and I get so many every day so I can't actually put them all into one video. So if I don't get to your question in this video, don't worry, I might get to it in the next one. If not, just drop it down in the comments and I'll get to it as soon as I can. So without further ado, let's jump into the first question. France Rose asks, how are you sure it's you that's haunted and not something you own? Okay, so there's a number of reasons I think that it's not something that I own and that it's actually me that's haunted. The first one is that over the last 6 years I've moved around a lot, and when I went away to uni in the first place, I kind of set out to have a fresh start. So I bought all new household stuff, new clothes, equipment, that sort of thing. It's all bought new. I mean, the guitar that I had before, it wasn't an old guitar. I bought it and, I only had it for a couple of years and then I swapped it for the new one. And the only things that I've really kept I can think of throughout that whole time was DVDs and books. And though it is perfectly possible that they could have attached themselves to that kind of object, I doubt it. The second reason is, and the reason I doubt it is because that doesn't account for the new spirits that come in and out. So for example, the introduction of Anna and Daniel, they came after I moved in on my own. You've got Peter, who came and went within the space of a few weeks. Like, nothing really came of that. Nothing came in or out of the house that was unusual, that I could put down to the appearance of Peter. He just came and went, and that was the end of it. So I definitely do think it's me, and that's pretty much the reason why. Danny Pops asks, do the ghosts stay out of your room since you told them not to enter before? For the most part, yes, but there are occasions where you do hear noises in there. Like, it's not always cut and dry, they've listened to me and they've stayed out. Because I think the problem is, the more I communicate, obviously the more I open myself up, the more spirits come forward to try and communicate. I don't think that's anything special about me. I think that's just how it is. I think if you're showing that you are actively trying to communicate with spirits, then they're going to come to try and have a go at communicating, because I don't imagine that's something they come across very often. And so I imagine whenever I do hear noises coming from the bedroom, that is just someone who hasn't been here before, doesn't know the rule, or just doesn't care. But it is just a matter of just going in and telling them again, look, this is off limits, this is my room, you're more than welcome to be here, and to try and communicate, but it doesn't happen in here. So yeah, for the most part, they tend to listen to me. Nezar asks, when you say you base your investigations on scientific knowledge, how could that be possible when there is no hard evidence on this matter and no evidence or enough info on other dimensions? So the thing about paranormal investigating is it's considered a pseudoscience, and I think the reason for that is that, one, the scientific community don't really take it that seriously, and two, there is never going to be one bit of evidence that can be absolutely undisputable and will convince anyone. I just don't think that's possible, because you can always put a bit of evidence down to, oh well, that was a software glitch, that was an electrical malfunction, and when all that fails, that was visual effects. I mean, I put a video up here of an object moving on its own. That is not normal, that is not natural, but someone will always be able to turn around and say, well, that was visual effects. Like, visual effects and technology have grown so much that you can pretty much replicate anything, and so it's impossible to really argue with that. You can say it's not, but that's your word against theirs, and the only way one person will ever 100% believe it, if they don't already, is if they experience something themselves. And so when I say I try to approach things from a scientific point of view, what I mean is I'm trying to collect data. I'm, say, for example, studying the moon phase, I'm keeping track of that, weather patterns, temperature, I use scientific equipment, EMF meters and things like that, to try and capture the data and correlate it to the activity. And then on top of that, I look at things from a very logical point of view. So if I see an orb, and we all know orbs, that could be dust, and I agree, that could just well be dust, but then I look at the evidence and I say, well, how can I prove that that's not dust? Not how do I prove that it is dust. I'd say, well, that K2 meter went off as the orb passed it. Dust doesn't carry an electromagnetic charge, especially enough to make a K2 meter spike. And so, well, I'm like, well, that can't be dust, but could it be some kind of bug that carries electromagnetic charge? And here in the UK, at least not that I've come across, especially not in this area, there are no bugs that carry that much electronic charge that will cause a K2 meter spike or an EMF spike of any kind. So that's kind of how I look at things. I try to disprove the normal occurrence, but I go in fully thinking that this could be a natural occurrence, and then try to get the data together to prove that it's not. And so that's kind of how I approach things scientifically, at least in my mind. Glenn asks, what is your actual goal with this activity? Are you hoping for some dramatic, definitive recording? This is actually a perfect question to follow on from the last one. I think in the short term, my goal is to help any spirits that need it. If they need to communicate, hopefully that gives them some kind of closure. If they have any messages they want to pass on, I guess the ultimate goal is to help them cross over and to move on to whatever it is that they need to move on to. On the broader spectrum of things, and I know I just said that it's not really possible, is to capture that one bit of undisputable evidence. And I know it is probably impossible, but it shouldn't dissuade us from trying it. And I think the way I approach it is by looking at it from multiple bits of equipment. So if I do an experiment, say with the Kinect, and I capture a figure on its own, if it's just the Kinect, you could put that down to a software glitch. But if at that same moment the Kinect captures this figure, the K2 meter goes off where that figure is, you've got the REM pod going off, and you've caught an orb on the night vision camera, and EVP and spirit boxes starting to give words and stuff, like that becomes harder and harder to argue with, because although I believe in coincidences, that many bits of equipment going off at once, I find very, very unlikely. And I think even a skeptic has to go, well, what are the chances of that? Although, don't put it past them, I have full faith that they will tell me it's fake anyway. Henry asks, how do you know if it is one of your family members? I honestly think if it was a family member or like a friend or something, that they would do something to let you know. I think you would feel it emotionally. I don't think emotionally you have to be a sensitive to pick this stuff up. I think emotional transference can happen to anybody, and I think they would try to affect you like that. If that failed, I think they would do something. I think they would move an object that mattered to you. You know what I mean? They would point to something that would make you realize. I think there would always be that moment where it just hits you who it is that's trying to communicate with you. Personally though, I would not go seeking it. I kind of live by a rule that, although as tempting as it is when I'm playing around on my spirit boxes to see if anyone I know and love is around, if they came to me, that's one thing, but I would never seek it, because I think to open yourself up like that, you are opening yourself up emotionally. You are very vulnerable at that point. So if there was ever a dark entity around that wanted to take advantage, if you're trying to communicate with someone you loved and you miss terribly, you're as open as you're ever going to be, and that is the perfect opportunity to jump in and try and manipulate you. So I try to stay very focused and logical about it and stay unattached as I possibly can. Charles asks, if I remember correctly, your brother was the one who originally detected strange behaviour in the house you were all staying in several years ago. My question, does your brother ever express envy or jealousy that it turned out to be you who were the one that was haunted and not him or the house? No, I don't think he's jealous or envious in any way, shape or form. He saw what went on over the first 3 years of this, and I think he was happy to be unattached and not affected by it. But that said, he is actually a bit of a sensitive. He's kind of like me in the way that you can kind of feel it out. Not like I don't think I'm psychic or anything like that, but he kind of has paranormal experiences from time to time. And so I have a story. I wanted him to come in and tell this story actually, because it interested me and I wanted him to share it, but getting him here is a nightmare. He goes off on his own little tangent, and so getting him in wasn't going to happen. So I'm going to tell it for him. A couple of years ago, he was living in Spain, and he lived in a house with a couple of people, and they had one rule, and that is you don't smoke in the house anywhere, because nobody likes the smell of it, whether you're a smoker or not. It doesn't smell nice in the house. And so they all agreed. One day he came home from work and he went straight into his bedroom, and he could smell smoke, like really strong, like stale smoke. And obviously he flipped out at that point. He went out and he's like, well, who's been smoking in my room? They all said, well, none of us. We know the rules. Nobody's smoking in the house. He goes, well, it stinks of smoke in there. No, you know what I mean? Somebody has to have smoked in there. He went back into the room trying to find out where exactly in the room this smell was coming from. And about a year before this, we'd lost a close family member, and they smoked quite heavily. And so he had this thought that, well, what if this is like some kind of visit? And he said the second the thought of that person came into his head, he had this unbearable pressure on his like mind, in his brain, like a strong headache kind of feeling, and he honestly felt like his head was going to explode. And he said it was so painful that he left the room, and when he left the room, the pain subsided almost instantly. And that's fascinating. He said when he went back in, he could feel it almost like it was building back up again. And so he had to just leave the room, and he just didn't go back in until the next day. He said when he went in the next day, the smell had gone, and there was no pressure on his mind. So I thought that was absolutely fascinating. I honestly couldn't think of a time that's ever happened to me. I think it's quite unique, but I don't think that it's the family member he was thinking of, because why would they want to hurt him unless that pain was a side effect of them trying to communicate in quite a strong manner. I can't imagine that being them. So interesting story. I don't think he's really jealous, because he does have his own experiences from time to time, and that one was one of my favourites. Pauline asks, why do they always ask for help? So I think every spirit's different in the reason that they need help. I think mostly it boils down to just unfinished business. As cliche as that sounds, I think everybody when they pass away must have something that they wish they'd said or done, that they wish they could go ahead and do. And so you see somebody actively trying to communicate with spirits, doing an EVP session or sat with a ghost box, you put the word help in there, instantly you've opened up that communication. You know the purpose of this spirit. It's a universal term. And so you say you need help, it's up to that investigator then whether or not they're going to actually try and do that. And so I think that's the reason. And even sometimes I think it just might be as simple as just acknowledgement that they are still around and that they do exist. So communicating with them is enough. And yeah, for me that's the reason I'd say they need help. Chris D asks, why do you not share your hand to write with the ghosts, like automatic writing? The problem with automatic writing is, although yeah, it's great and you can sometimes write some pretty interesting stuff, there is no quantifiable evidence to what within that was a spirit talking and what was just your imagination going wild. I think there is no way of proving that wasn't just you writing some stuff on a piece of paper. And though I agree that it's definitely worth experimenting with, I would never put that forward as evidence for the simple fact that I can't prove that it's paranormal in origin. I could just sit there and write if I was so inclined and say, I did some automatic writing, look at this amazing thing that's been written down. I can't prove it, unfortunately. So unless I could somehow find a way to put more evidence behind it, more equipment involved to monitor that situation, I think for now it's something that I'll experiment with but not really put forward as evidence. Fried Chicken Live asks, do you have any examples on what risks there are in being aggressive towards ghosts? I'm really curious. So if you use provocation or be aggressive towards a spirit in any way, then all you're doing is encourage them to reciprocate and be aggressive in return. I don't see why someone would feel the need to do that. I've always found it better to be nice to a spirit, ask them kindly if they wouldn't mind helping. But I guess the risks that you run in being aggressive towards a spirit is if that spirit wasn't particularly aggressive in the first place, then like a person, you're angry towards them, they're going to get angry back. And so they can lash out at you in some way, shape or form. People have been scratched, bitten, although yeah, it probably does give them energy. I can't dispute that, because people do get evidence when they use provoking. And so in giving them that energy, they have the ability to affect you physically, like I say, scratches, bites, things like that. But as well as that, they might then hold a grudge against you. You've come in and you've been rude and aggressive. They could attach themselves to you. You're still opening yourself up to them in a very negative way. So there are negative feelings towards you at that point. So you could get attachments if a spirit is really negative, or God forbid a demonic entity that you've been aggressive towards. They're not going to take kindly. They can then go forward and they could try and actually possess you. They could affect you emotionally. People have been through instances of provocation in the past where they have an attachment and their entire personality changes. They start thinking angry, like homicidal thoughts, like actually looking at a person and thinking, I just want to hurt you. Like I want to kill you right now, and they've no idea why. And that is all part of that possession, that kind of that emotional transference from an entity that you've royally pissed off. So no, I certainly wouldn't encourage it at all. I don't see the point in risking it. If you're kind towards a spirit, you're at much less risk than if you were aggressive towards one. Don Wilson asks, no disrespect, Michael, so don't take this the wrong way, please. Let me ask you, why do you think a once living person would find it worthy to spend so much time haunting anyone? I think at some point it's just got to boil down to a matter of communication and companionship. I think if a person is particularly receptive to you and they are aware of your presence, I think you're more likely to stick around that person, even if you don't necessarily have a great deal in common with them. I think the fact that they can sense you nearby and they can communicate with you is definitely going to keep you around, because you're not going to get that anywhere else. I mean, you might, but what are the chances? And so I think generally it's just companionship. Like people, we try to stick to groups. We get friends and we stick to them because we don't want to be alone. Crazy Cat asks, everyone asked you about the paranormal, so I'm going to go off topic. How many tattoos do you have and what are they? So I got 3 tattoos in total. The one on my stomach I got when I was 16. It's the lead singer of Him has this tattoo, and I just thought it was awesome, so I decided to get that. The one on the back of my neck is a cladder ring with a heartagram in the middle of it, and the cladder, it's like friendship, loyalty, love, that sort of thing, and it just always meant a lot to me. It always spoke to me. So I mean, I've got a ring. Sean has got a ring of the same symbol, so that's the reason I got that. And the third one was a little bit of a joke. I got the word Andy tattooed on the bottom of my right foot. And so that's it for this week's Q&A, guys. I hope I answered your questions sufficiently and in enough detail. If I didn't get to your question in this one, like I say, don't worry. Just drop it down in the comments and I'll answer it as soon as I can. So thank you all so much for watching. And as always, I'll post any and all activity as and when I get it.